We return to Billionaire Bunker Hunter. Our local billionaire has decided to buy a spare home in the event of another apocalyptic scenario. So far, he has rejected Nebraska, Alaska, New Zealand, the far north, and several other sites. We've run out of places you can go. Pick New Zealand, like Peter Thiel and a bunch of those other Silicon Valley weirdos did. And then from Lord of the Rings? I can't go there. Wait, there's another one. But it's not good. It's cold, it's airless, hard to get to. Where? Sounds interesting. Mars. Mars? Iowa? Never. No, Mars the planet. Cold, airless, lower gravity, hard to get to. It's like Utah and Antarctica, but without the Mormons. Sold! No! This is just an excuse to flee the Earth and not fix climate change. Boo! Take me with you! Any more stereotypes?
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Morning, everyone. I'm the pressure-fed astronaut, here to take on spaceflight, space cadets, and the occasional conspiracy theorist. Today, we're going to tackle something small and easy. Mars colonization. There are two types of people very vocal about the subject, and they're both wrong. On one hand, we have SpaceX fanboys who think Mars colonization will start in 2026. And on the other, we have people who think that people like Elon are going to flee the Earth because of climate change and other nefarious things. So today, we're going to dismiss these notions. We're going to look at the viability of Mars colonization, how it's related to the wealthy, and then other really bad arguments. And of course, here's my general disclaimers. The SpaceX fanboy and purple-haired college student that you don't like are generalizations of people I've seen in person and online. My other disclaimer is that I do take spaceflight from a more conservative approach. While I enjoy gosh wow 60s sci-fi imagery and thoughts of retiring on the moon, I know when to put those notions aside and focus on the more pragmatic and practical issues. Ew. It's prudent to begin this discussion by defining what colonization actually is. And we'll also be ignoring some of the negative historical connotations to the idea and the word. I describe colonization as the ability to pack my bags and move to Mars in search of a job, get a job, live there, maybe lose said job but not get kicked out, maybe start a family, and then die, ideally. Essentially the ability to live on Mars without a job. Antarctica has semi-permanent residents in the form of researchers and their support staff, but you can't move there. And the same applies to oil rigs. The first question we have to ask ourselves on the question of Mars colonization is if we have the technological capability to do it. You know, that's probably a good place to start. The answer is not really. From a propulsion and spacecraft system standpoint, this is possible. Going to Mars is possible. NASA and other agencies have been sending uncrewed spacecraft to the planet since the 1960s. They've even landed a few. This part is not up for debate. What is up for debate are Mars mission architectures. We're not going to debate those. But one common thread for all these designs is life support systems. Right now, the longest serving life support systems are on the International Space Station, which have been under maintenance and resupply for about 20 years. From my own research, equipment on the ISS has a lifetime of about 2 to 3 years. Now, considering that Mars missions are at least 3 years long, the tech has to obviously be improved. NASA and other agencies are, of course, working on this subject right now. This isn't a revelation, it's rather obvious. A good example of this would be increasing the ISS's water recycling capabilities from 74% to 98%. An obvious benefit of doing this is needing less water mass for longer missions. And these systems have to operate and last for about 5 years with minimal maintenance and only spare parts available to the crew. Now, of course, when on Mars, you could make parts out of local resources. This hasn't been done before, but would make a great tech demonstration mission. But a Mars colony isn't going to haul up all the food it'll ever need for anyone who will ever live there. Growing food in space is a slowly developing field. We saw it happen in The Martian. There are experiments happening right now on the International Space Station. And on Earth, there's been China, High Seas, and plenty of others doing this work. And so far, the results seem promising. Promising doesn't mean mature. Based on my cursory search of space food growth, there have been leaps made, but the techniques and methods needed for long-term colonization are at a low technology readiness level. Growing a few radishes on the ISS is nothing compared to what is needed for a Mars colony. An example of a problem that I think needs to be examined would be biomagnification. It would suck to discover that your Martian hydroponics setup causes lethal levels of vitamin A to build up in your carrots. There are issues in space food growth that haven't been found yet that might crop up in the future. Growing food in space is still in its infancy. Same with people living in space. The long-term physiological effects of living on Mars are completely unknown at this point. Can a person live on Mars for the rest of their lives, let alone have children? What are the health effects? We're not even talking about the psychological effects of long-term isolation like we'd see here. Yeah, sure, people go to Antarctica all the time, but this is so much different. Granted, one of the only ways to solve these biological challenges is to actually fly those kinds of missions. Is Mars colonization technically possible? Maybe. In the next 20 years, we'll probably see life support systems capable of lasting these missions. Farming in space, it's quite hard to make an actual assessment. Let's say 50 years, assuming there are no serious setbacks to these ideas. The big unknown is if people can even survive the low-gravity environment. Radiation too! You know what makes these missions possible? Money. The second question we must ask ourselves is if Mars colonization is economically viable. Just because something is technologically possible does not mean it's an actual practical solution. There are two ways we can look at this problem. Now, the first is what can be done cheaply on Mars, right? Brine, mining, fungus, what's on Mars that's cheap? Or what is justifiably expensive? What is exclusive to Mars that can't be done anywhere else in the solar system? I couldn't find anything particularly appealing about Mars. If space and asteroid mining does become a thing, then the asteroids would be a lot easier to access and work with than Mars. There aren't any specialized metals or resources that are available on this planet that you can't find in easier to access places. And in fact, Mars is worse than these places because it lacks nitrogen, potassium, and phosphorus, all of which are needed for life and life support systems technologies. So whatever economic activity you do on Mars is going to end up being in favor of getting these raw materials. You can see the problem here already. Now, granted, you could just move IT, your software team, your Etsy shop, or whatever to Mars. But whatever you do has to be justifiable to investors and the business. Whatever your business venture is has to take into account that you're moving something to the surface of another planet. Mars ain't cheap. I have doubts on the economic viability of this. From where I stand, there is no serious economic case for Mars that does not necessitate a series of miracles to occur. Ah, but you forgot that Elon Musk said he'll be sending crews to Mars in as early as 2026. He also said we'd have 1 million robo-taxis by now. Look, we get it. I don't like Elon and I think he's a con man. He's an imperialist oppressor who exploits child labor in the Congo. Billionaires are policy failures. Alright, let's ignore his problems for a moment. Is there any validity to his Mars plans? No. If you watch his presentations, you realize that Musk's Mars colonization plans are just rehashes of Bob Zubrin's Case for Mars, written in 1996, including Zubrin's charitable assumptions on mass performance and dismissal of radiation. Before you get all, but those are possible, I'm going to point out here that there's no evidence Musk is working on anything for Mars surface activities. Right? There's no life support systems, habitat designs, ground vehicle development, or, a crew training program. You don't work at SpaceX. They could be working on it. And don't forget about Starship. That's true. I don't know. The thing is, I'd expect more from Musk in relation to his Mars plans than what's been shown already. Especially if he's planning a crew mission this soon. If he was serious about Mars, I'd expect a lot more. You know, crew training programs, a mock-up of a base in the desert or Antarctica, and a timeline with specific missions and programs to be completed. Starship is also a massively unproven system. Yes, I know it hopped. An economic argument would be nice too. Oh, and if your solution to the cost of going to Mars is glorified slavery, you shouldn't be allowed to talk on this subject. Ever. Musk's likely social, political, and economic beliefs aren't very tenable to a Mars colony. Hyper-individualist libertarian capitalism probably isn't a good idea on a place where you don't have air. These technologies should be fairly developed and understood by the time Musk shoots for Mars. Even Starship is nowhere near ready for such a mission. And I really don't see a space program like this happening in less than 6 years. I'd say Mars colonization is not something that we'll see happen in our lifetimes. Instead, it'll probably end up more like Antarctica than anything else. But let's say a miracle did occur and Mars colonization did happen in some form. Would billionaires go there? A common argument for and against Mars is that it'll be used as a backup for Earth in the event of a tragedy. This is fantastically dumb. If an asteroid's coming down to kill us and Bruce Willis can't be bothered more than normal, colonizing Mars is the worst way to solve this problem. First of all, it'd be easier to deflect the asteroid than go colonize Mars. That should be obvious. And secondly, if an apocalyptic scenario is going to happen to Earth at some point in the near future, it better happen at the right time. The Mars hum and transfer window is every 2 years and 2 months, and only lasts about 3. So, tight fit. The next is in 2022. So if a big rock's to come and hit us between now and then, oh boy, we're screwed. And if there was a colony already on Mars at the time of this apocalyptic event, they probably wouldn't last that long either. You gotta remember, resources are slim and they're dependent on near constant resupply. And this is assuming they have enough people there already for, repopulation. And none of these people would be billionaires. Of what use is a billionaire on Mars? Scientists, engineers, psychologists are all infinitely more valuable than a guy who trades stock. Unless you need someone to clean the toilets, of course. You could argue that we should set up a Mars colony now to prepare ourselves in the event something does happen in the distant future. Sure. And it depends on the situation, too. Maybe the moon or O'Neill cylinders could be a better option, depending on human physiological limits. Well, and funding, too, obviously. Okay, so let's get Hollywood out of our heads. Let's focus on something more likely for Mars. Economic activity of some form. Elon finds a massive lithium deposit and sets up a Tesla factory there or something. These mining towns aren't going to be luxurious places. They'll probably be in lava tubes, all dusty and cramped. Not exactly a wealthy person utopia. You don't see the CEOs of oil companies partying on the offshore platforms. Considering how certain CEOs act and treat their employees, it's probably not the best idea to go to a place that's virtually inaccessible and where they're outnumbered. Comrade. And these mining towns aren't going to be anything like we see on Earth. Ideally, they'd be something like co-ops, but more realistically, company towns. American consumerism isn't exactly possible in places like that. And again, we have to ask ourselves, why would a billionaire want to live in this environment? An approximation for the first Mars town would probably be something like Antarctica. To get a job in Antarctica, not only do you have to be qualified for it, you also have to go through rigorous screening, specifically psychological due to the extreme environment and isolation. Mars is a lot like that, but worse. Our first settlers won't be fragile Silicon Valley software guys. I'd wager that our first true interplanetary colonists will be religious or political extremists who feel they have nowhere else to go but space. Some of the first settlers in North America were religious whack jobs. Again, we're talking about putting people on an airless desert. This isn't the most appealing place. But what if it wasn't airless? Just terraform Mars. Nuke it. Then it'll be Earth-like. You have no idea what you're talking about. As you can see here, I have the book on the subject. It's a touch out of date, but it's still mostly accurate. The idea is that you make Mars Earth-like by giving it water, an atmosphere, and acceptable surface temperatures. Then colonization is easy. Except terraforming requires an economy, society, engineering capacity, industrial capacity, and political system capable of modifying a planet's environment. AKA, not something possible within our lifetimes. Period. Anyone talking about terraforming as a serious endeavor right now has no idea what that is and should be dismissed thusly. Plus, there's this whole debate on whether you should or shouldn't terraform. Some say yes, others say no. They have moral, political, ethical, and ecological reasons for their arguments. They're all very good, but this is a debate for, 1,000 years from now, not next week. Couldn't you just fix the Earth first? Good argument, though I'd wager that's already the idea. Fix Earth before terraforming Mars, because that would be a lot easier and is a bit more pertinent. I wonder if there are terraforming advocates who deny climate change. See, I'm right! One of the most common anti-Mars colonization arguments I've seen is, Mars is a cold, airless desert. Why would anyone want to live there? Before you get mad, this was actually said to my face in college. This, kids, is called projection. Just because you don't like something doesn't mean everybody else hates it too. Some people prefer urban areas, other people prefer rural. I voluntarily moved to Alabama. Now, when I say Mars is a cold, airless desert, that's to temper your expectations. But they are going to Mars to flee Earth from climate change and wealth inequality, like that movie Elysium. Not really. Again, Mars isn't that appealing to the ultra-wealthy. Sure, they are buying up land and building gated communities for themselves, but going to Mars is a drastic and largely unintelligent move. They can afford consultants who will tell them that going to Mars isn't a smart idea. They'll probably build floating cities before even considering Mars. Maybe in 300 years or so, when there's a big dome city on Mars, they'll all move there to play squash or whatever. I can't predict the future, but right now, no. But technology used in colonizing Mars could be used here on Earth, especially growing food in rough places. Kids in Africa could use that. You could also do this on Earth without even needing to go to Mars. People already work on urban and vertical farming. This argument is a wash because the technology for colonizing Mars and farming there could theoretically also be used on Earth. There is the possibility that this tech is too specialized and can only work on Mars and nowhere else, or that certain components in the technology is too expensive or too specialized, requires specialized maintenance that is not possible in the parts of Africa where it's needed. And now for the part that gets everyone mad. From watching and reading what Mars colonization proponents, especially the SpaceX fandom, say, it's been quite clear to me that these arguments are almost purely emotional and quasi-religious, with hefty doses of delusion. Having watched several videos on Mars colonization, most of which are just elaborate fan fictions, I haven't seen any technical or economic substantiation for any of these ideas. Instead, I get Pascal's wager. What if an asteroid hits us? That's not a very convincing argument, by the way. Elon will take us all to Mars. The way these people talk about Mars colonization gives me the impression that they think it'll somehow save them from their unfulfilling lives. If only they could go to Mars, then they'll finally get a girlfriend, have purpose, live a life of contentment and luxury. Going to Mars will definitely change someone. There's no doubt about that. But it's not gonna fix you. You will still be you when it's over. Mars isn't a wonderland of luxury and wonders. It's an unforgiving, cold, airless desert. No, billionaires aren't going to Mars. I'm not? No. Even if it becomes technologically and biologically viable, there's still no real economic case to go there. Even if the economic case does come to fruition, Mars will start out as a blue-collar place. Mars colonization may be viable beyond our lifetimes, but not now. If you do want to supplant your science fiction fantasies, go read Kim Stanley Robinson's Mars trilogy. It's probably the best science fiction on space settlement ever written. And if you want to simulate what living on Musk City would be like, play BioShock. Before you get mad at me saying, hey, you've done a surface level analysis of Mars colonization while complaining about surface level analyses of things, I have a video coming up for you. No, I'm not designing a Mars colony. That's like a 5-year effort on my part. I'm way too lazy for that. Instead, I'm going to find someone else's video about Mars colonization and say they're wrong and point out why. I'm the pressure-fed astronaut, not a future Martian colonist. For political reasons. I'm tired. No trivia today. Bye.